Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a histogram. So I've given you an example of what a histogram looks like here. You can see it almost looks very similar to a bar graph, but slightly different. So here are some key things to keep in mind when we're thinking about a histogram. We use a histogram when we're looking for graphing the frequency of data, just like before, but the frequency is given to us in ranges. What does that mean? Well, if you look at the horizontal axis of the graph, you can see here that each number or each category is in groups of 10. 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. So when you have groups, we call those ranges, a certain number starting here and a certain number ending here. And that is when we use a histogram. If you're ever given that on a test or a quiz, or you're asked to create with ranges of data, you're going to be drawing a histogram. Next, you can see that the bars of a histogram are connected, which is different from a bar graph where they're completely separate. And again, you know that you are always having you're expected to always have a title and descriptions of what's being given to you on each axis. And your vertical axis always has to increase by the same amount. Every interval has to be the same in between. So here I'm going up by tens. Okay, so let's get into actually creating one. Okay, so as you can see, I was really interested in figuring out how big the different trees are in my backyard. I'm a big environmentalist, and I want to make sure that the trees in my backyard are healthy. So I decided that I was going to measure the circumference of those trees and figure out how wide they are around. So I know you've never seen that word, circumference. You're going to learn a lot about that in grade 8. But the circumference just means, think of it like the perimeter of a circle. It's if I measured all the way around a circle, that would be its circumference. So basically I took a measuring tape and I put it around every tree in my backyard, and I wanted to measure what that was. Okay? And I got all this data here. I got 20 different trees. I measured how many centimeters each one is across, and now I want to put it into a graph. Now, I could draw a bar graph for this, but you can see that it's really like not very organized, and it's hard to read 20 different trees. And you can imagine this was just a selection of trees. If I did 50 trees or 100 trees, it would be very annoying to have to graph every single individual tree that way. So instead, what I can do is use a table and put ranges of data in here instead of just the individual data. So what I'm going to do is, in this first column, I'm going to go from 0 to 10 centimeters. Any tree that is between 0 and 10 centimeters in the circumference, I'm going to put in this part of my frequency table. Anything from 11 to 20 is going to go here. And I'm going to fill in the rest here so that we can start putting them in. And I don't think I have anything more than 80 centimeters, so I always put my units if it's not clear. Okay. So now what I can do is actually just count how many trees fit into the category of being 0 to 10 centimeters wide. And so I'm going to assign all of these and figure out how many I have. Okay, so I filled out my frequency table with the ranges of data that I have. And I know that I had 20 trees to start, so that means my total should be 20. Now that I have my data in my frequency table, you can see it's a lot more organized this way than it was if I wrote them all out individually. The reason we might use ranges of data is because if we have a lot of it, we might not want to show every individual piece of data. It might be good enough to show just ranges of data this way. So that's why I might want to do something like this. So now we can go ahead and start building our graph. Okay. So as you can see, I'm keeping my frequency table really close by before I make my graph. because I'm going to need this information in order to complete it. And also, I've written the steps to how do we actually build this graph, and you can see that they're pretty much exactly the same as making a bar graph. The only difference is when we get to drawing our bars, we know that they're going to be connected, and we're going to make sure that we're putting ranges of data, not just individual numbers or individual categories. So the first thing I do is I draw my two axes of my graph. You're going to need a ruler to do that. You always want to be precise. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the category names. To make sure that I'm spacing them out properly, I'm going to line my ruler up on the side of my horizontal axis, and I'm going to draw them at even spacing. So let me do that right now. Now I'm going to label this axis, so I know that what these numbers are going to represent is the circumference in centimeters. Okay. And I've got to make sure that I'm writing the proper ranges, so I'm going to zoom out and make sure that I write those properly. Okay, notice that I don't need to write the word centimeters after each one because I've written it in my description. So we can assume that because I've written in centimeters down here, each one of these numbers is going to be measured in centimeters. Okay, so next thing for me to do is write the frequency. So I have to label the y-axis, which is going to be frequency. In this case, the frequency is the number of trees. Okay, so I'm going to take my ruler out, and now I'm going to mark spacing that's even on the vertical or the y-axis. So the reason why I'm skipping by 2's in this case is to give my data or my graph some length. Each bar, the longer I make the y-axis, the longer each bar is going to be, which is going to give me a nice looking graph. Okay, so now I know that each one of these is equal to 1. So this is going to be, this is going to be 1. Let's get rid of our ruler. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. So now we have a label for our y-axis. We have a label, we have a label for our x-axis. We've numbered everything. We're ready to start drawing our bars. We know that they have to be connected. So here's how we're going to do that. Very similar to creating a bar in our bar graph. But now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that they're all connected. So I'm going to draw my first line right here at 4 all the way to 0. And my next line is going to be halfway between the two ranges, all the way at 4. So I draw a line all the way straight down. Great. My next one is 11 to 20, and I have 3 of them. So my first line is actually already drawn for me, right? Because they're all connected. So all I have to do is move my ruler to the next spot that I need a line and then draw one from 3. Again, it would be very easy if you have graph paper because you can just see exactly where 3 is. I, unfortunately, am going to have to estimate here. So I'm going to go from 3. Perfect. Now from 21 to 30, I have 2, so I move this over, and I draw a line. I find where 2 is, and I draw myself a nice line down. From 31 to 40, I have 3 again, so I go up to 3, draw myself a line down. Now I can connect the tops of my bars here. I want them all to be nice and straight. You're going to use a ruler for this, just for the sake of time. I'm going to connect them this way. So there you go. You can see all of my bars are roughly the exact same size. That's the goal. You want your bars in your histogram, just like your bar graph, to be the exact same size. And unlike a bar graph where they're all separate, a histogram, they're all connected. Okay? The last step for me to do is to name this graph, right? And I'm going to do so by writing that this graph is all about the circumference of different trees in my backyard. So again, when you're naming graphs, you're being very, very clear as to what these graphs are showing you. You don't need to be creative. You really want to be just clear and obvious. The last thing that you might want to do, and you could do it if you want to, is to color in each bar so that they're different. You don't need to, but you're welcome to if you want to. Just makes things a little bit easier to read. Up to you. But if you're going to color them, don't do like Mr. Lachance did. Fill them in completely so that they look nice. Don't just scribble. The goal in any graph is that it's easy to read and everything is clear and organized. Okay, that's it for this video. Stay tuned for our next one.